All right, we have time for some questions, and I don't see, oh, there's the, oh, I had to wake up the microphone operators. I think, who's got a question? Oh, we got all kinds of questions. Let's start over here with one of our Canadians. Right in front of you.
Hi, this is a question for you, Jim, because I'm also Canadian. You were talking about the third-party advisory committees that you've initiated and started. So I guess just as a statement, I believe that the sort of drive within the industry in Canada is certainly towards transparency and recognizing the sort of need for social license comes from what happened with the Kinder Morgan application. I think that's led a lot of, interest in this. So what I was wondering, you brought in these advisory committees to help you with SEPA, but are you encouraging your members to do the same thing with like third-party audits? For bringing in, Kinder Morgan. We're wondering if the National Energy Board said that they can go ahead, and if it does go ahead, they've got these recommendations. And one thing that was interesting to my group was, the pre-construction and the environmental issues with the pre-construction. So we've asked Trans Mountain, would they be interested in having third-party, professional auditors there to see that they do this? Are you encouraging your group, because I noticed Trans Mountain is part of SEPA, so are you encouraging them to do that?
So I'll confess I'm not familiar with that particular instance in terms of what you're talking about, but I think that what I would refer you back to is the comments that that Peter Watson made as the chair of the National Energy Board this morning too, in terms of saying there were 100 and, if I recall correctly, 157 conditions in the case of the Kinder Morgan application, and the NEB is absolutely charged with the responsibility to ensure that those conditions are met through the whole of the construction process. And so they should have, I'm sure, they will have inspectors on the ground as that construction is unfolding. And I'm also, quite confident that should concerned citizens such as yourself have, bring to the attention of the board observations, that your belief or your experience is that it's not working in line with the conditions or the code or the standards that are in place, that they'd put an inspector on the ground in a heartbeat or two in order to make sure that that's responded to. The third party that we're using is primarily around, excuse me, that whole Integrity First program. I didn't, go into great detail around it, but it's meant to ensure that the assessments that the companies are conducting of themselves in a lot of these areas that we're developing through Integrity First are adequately verified. And by no means is that seeking to replace the role of the regulator. That's just saying us, like, we want to demonstrate complete openness in terms of how this is working. Then the ultimate goal on that front too will be, as it is done in responsible care, to have citizens such as yourself actually participate in those verifications so that you can see firsthand that it is credible, it is real, it's meant to be, and we believe it is. So, direct answer, I think ultimately Mr. Watson is still here, so is the Chief Safety Officer from the NEB. Easily, folks you can raise those types of concerns to, and I'll be pleased to remit your comments to the leadership at Kinder Morgan as well.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-oh, we lost control of the mic.
Not yet. My question is to Jim, and it's regarding shortly after our May 19th meeting in Calgary with yourselves, the NEB staff and members of the public, an announcement was made by the NEB regarding a joint committee with SEPA. And I wonder if you could explain a little bit of what's happened in the meantime with that.
Please do. I think the formation of that committee, and I know there seemed to be a little bit of concern that it was almost coincident with the forum, and I think what I would say was that it had been in the works to create that forum for some time. I have the privilege of co-chairing that committee with the Chief Operating Officer of the National Energy Board. I think it speaks very directly to Mr. Watson's desires to see like where there are challenges or issues that really refer to the like not the application but the life cycle operations of the companies. How do we put in place an opportunity to enhance the collaboration that can occur, which in no way undermines or fetters the primacy of the regulator. So it allows us to come together. The sessions there have been 2 meetings. There was an initial meeting, or the exact date escapes me. I want to say July, roughly, of 2016. It was chaired by Mr. Watson and by the chair, the CEO of SEPA. They sort of set out the marching orders for the committee, set and approved the terms of reference and set out a working agenda for us. And so really it is intended to permit that forum within which industry can collaborate on ongoing operational issues that are completely apart from anything to do with an application, which is fully subject to all the expectations of natural justice. Allows us to identify issues, to bring the knowledge that's resident within the industry, as well as tremendous knowledge within the board itself, to bear on these problems and to find ways to move forward. Personal opinion, the meetings could be enhanced, in terms of adding greater degrees of openness as well with citizens such as yourselves, because I think there's absolutely nothing to hide. I think you'd be encouraged if you ever saw the kinds of conversations and the things we're working on. So, and that's really where it's at. And the next meeting is, I believe, just recently been scheduled for the 16th of December in order to close out the year and talk about some of the ongoing actions that we're working towards.
I've heard maybe a dozen times in the last 2 days that we all want the same thing, 0 incidents. And I don't have any doubt that we all want 0 incidents. But it's been some years since I've been a lobbyist, but I have or a legislator, but I have some familiarity when you get into the legislation or rulemaking. It doesn't seem like everybody wants the same thing. I mean, there are very, very intense differences. And my question to you, it's both I guess a challenge and a question. On the one hand, we all want the same thing. We know we want the ones. No one wants, we don't have any narcissistic sociopaths, except running for president maybe, but but really, most normal people want the same thing. But then why is it, I mean, you have other intervening needs, concerns, security, profits. I guess I'm asking you to respond to, and to dig in sincerely, because we don't want the same things in the same context. And how do we get to 0? And we have to recognize what our differences are. Coalitions are great. Carls are rare. But it seems shallow.
I guess we'll all take a shot at this. We do all want the same thing. There's no question in my mind that we want the same thing, but I don't think we all see the same path to get there. And I think you make a great point. This is not easy. It's not easy striking a balance. I mean, let's face it, if you wanted to build a perfectly safe distribution system, it would be, fully welded stainless steel pipe that could never fail. But that would cost, it's not possible. Plus, we have to understand that these systems have been built over more than 100 years. I mean, somebody asked me at dinner last night or at the cocktail party, how old's your oldest piece of pipe? Well, my oldest piece of pipe was installed during the Civil War. right? And it's still functioning very well under the streets of Boston. So our systems have evolved over a long period of time, and expectations of the public, the regulator, and the customers have changed over that period of time. So new regulations and new rules are a part of that evolution, and they need to be implemented in a way that we can do it, and we can do it, economically and without too much disruption to the community. And we can slowly, well, not slowly, we can incrementally improve everything that we do to get to the same place. But I really sincerely want the same thing that you do. Sincerely want the same thing that you do. A safe, reliable, clean, affordable energy delivery system for this country. But getting there takes time and it takes energy, because the assets, some of the assets went in the ground a long time ago. They went in the ground before record keeping was very good, so we don't even know in some cases exactly what we have. We have to dig it up and look at it to fix it and repair it. So I think we want to get there. I think the regulators are doing an amazing job of writing the right kinds of regulation and legislation to help get us there. But it takes time. The problem didn't happen overnight. It doesn't get solved overnight. So I don't know what more I can say, but that's my opinion.
And probably come at it from a similar viewpoint as and it's, as Carl mentioned, in Canada we've been sort of working with this abstract concept called social license, and who has it, who grants it, how do you understand really what it means. And I think, and again, I'll echo the comments, and I firmly believe in, and had the privilege to serve there, that the boards and regulatory commissions have incredibly complex roles to try and fulfill. I mean, who gets to decide the public interest at the national level? And at the national level, it could be very, very different than any individual community, or certainly your backyard, if you need to invoke eminent domain, or the kinds of things that must be done, from time to time in order to succeed in constructing national infrastructure. Who decides which community is going to be flooded and never be seen again when you need to put a dam up? Who decides, where the wires go when you build new power lines and pipelines and so on? And these are complex decisions that have to be made, and at times, individual interests, can't align with national interests. But I can say that, from my experience, having had the privilege to serve at both the board and now to represent these companies, that when it comes to safety, they're completely aligned. The cost of any incident now, and the costs to, reputational concerns on the part of any single company, or especially at the industry level, are astronomical in comparison to the cost of actually putting a safe system and maintaining a safe system in the ground. So from that viewpoint, I firmly believe that we're aligned in terms of wanting to provide a safe and, socially sustainable energy system for our nations. Where the friction occurs now is saying, well, how do we balance that off with the interests of, in various communities? Are there direct economic benefits? How do they see that? How does that work? Very, very complex issues. And we can only get there by working through them and having the quality of quality of conversation that occurs in forums such as this, again, for which I thank Carl and PST for creating.
Now, I'm looking at it from the regulator standpoint, and that's a great question. I had some time to ponder it. Obviously, in a relatively safe industry, when we're looking at regulations, you make sure they pass the cost-benefit analysis. So as a regulator, I have to deal with, as an inspector, as a regional director, I have to deal with what I got, and you have to start getting creative. You have to get creative in what you look at. We all know risk is probability times consequence, and sometimes I wonder if we just focus too much on probability, and what I do is I actually try to focus on how do I drive down consequence, the river crossings, stuff that could flow into a nearby reservoir or a nearby creek. So I've kind of tweaked, my approach to enforcing the regulations. That's number one, is looking at the consequence side. And number two is I look at change. I go straight to change. I have this set of regulations, and I focus on, what's changed since I last been out there. But it's, you know, the regulations give me a strategy, but I have to keep changing my tactics to become more efficient. So, and yeah, I like tilting at windmills. I don't know.
All right, I'm going to give a little bit of public, because I skipped over some slides yesterday that went after this directly, because I've come to believe that when everybody says they want to get to zero, they're being totally truthful too. I think the catch is, how quick do we want to get to zero? And quickness has to do with how much money we want to spend to get to zero. And we used to have meetings with one of the biggest gas companies around, and somebody that I really respect, one of the heads of one of those companies, and you know, he said, boy, we're spending billions of dollars to implement integrity management. And I said, but integrity management only applies to 7% of the pipelines in this country. What about the other 93%? Well, it's taken all of our effort to do 7% of the pipelines. And the public views these companies as being richer than God, and they ought to be able to do more than one thing at a time. And the reality is that they can't, for some of the reasons you just heard. And sometimes it's not even the companies that are in control. Sometimes there's rate regulators that won't let people replace pipelines because they're worried about someone's gas bill going up $2 a month. So there's all kinds of blame to go around, and some of it falls on all of our shoulders, I think. But you know, in our view, it's really, I think everybody wants to get to zero, but how quick do we want to get to zero? And I think that's where we probably vary on who's sitting up here. All right. Oh, we still have hands up. How about Mr. Jacoby here?
Thank you, sir. One comment, that 7% is hypothetically the most sensitive 7% of the pipelines out there. So they are focusing their efforts where it will hypothetically do the most good. That's not to say that the other 93% doesn't need attention. Back to Sue's comment about taking 3 years to get inspection results, Section 7 of the Pipes Act of 2016, recently enacted, has a requirement that within 30 days of an inspection, PHMSA is supposed to conduct a post-inspection briefing with the owner of the operator and outline any concerns, and then they have to follow up in 90 days. Having said that, I've been involved in a couple of inspections subsequent to that. It's been more than 30 days, and I haven't heard anything. Chris, would you care to tell us how PHMSA is planning on making that happen?
All right. First of all, I don't think it just applies to PHMSA. I think it also applies to the states that PHMSA funds. So that's number one.
Do they know that?
Well, it just got passed a couple months ago,
okay.
but yeah, I think they're waking up. I briefed them, and NAPSR. It's gonna be a land shift. Yeah. The second thing is, you know, we had a discussion. When does an inspection end? Is it when you pull off? Is it when you leave the operator? Is it when you get the last piece of information from the thing? I think that's something that needs to be decided. But it came apart. 3 years is obviously too long. And the way I run it in my region is the operator should have no surprises. When we leave, he should have no surprises. He shouldn't be, especially if it's something of impending risk. You know, they should know. So at least a verbal or you know, some type of exit briefing should be conducted always when you leave the site. But we do we'll strive to get something out. I think the thing says 30 days for the facts and another 60 days for something in writing. So yeah, we're being told by Congress.
And I will reiterate what I said. Most of the time, the collaboration is really good, and most of the time we get results right away. And most of the inspectors right on the job site will say, do you realize you didn't put that insulating kit in the right way? They'll stop the crew right on the spot and fix the problem. Still write the NOPV, which, again, shame on us if we make a mistake. We deserve to be fined. Most of them do that, but not always. And when it doesn't happen, it can create problems. So it's an anomaly. You know, I wanted to bring some real world examples to the conversation, so it wasn't just me opining on what was going on. I wanted to bring some examples. Most of the time, we get relatively quick results.